don't usually expect much from the Lichess daily puzzle. Don't get me wrong, they're perfectly fine, but quite often it's a fairly standard tactic. Maybe it's mate in 2, maybe you win a queen, maybe there's a skewer, a fork, a pin. Nice enough, you solve it in 30 seconds, everybody goes home happy. But every now and then, one appears that's actually pretty good. Today's puzzle genuinely surprised me, and after solving it, I ended up tracking down the original game it came from because I wanted to know how on earth these pieces ended up being arranged like this. And honestly, I think the game itself is even more interesting than the puzzle. Technically, the daily puzzle starts a few moves later, but I think we'd be doing this position a disservice if we didn't rewind slightly because the move that sets everything up is absolutely brilliant. So just look at this position. Both kings have clearly had a miserable afternoon. White's king is already wandering around the queenside, while black has every piece aimed in roughly the same direction, and it feels like somebody has to be getting checkmated very soon. The funny thing is, although black is completely winning here, it's actually not that incredibly easy to find the right continuation. Your first instinct might be something like rook to c2 check, but after king to a1, the attack suddenly stalls. There simply aren't enough checks. Rook to e2 check doesn't work either because white controls that square. And notice another nice little detail. Black can't simply take the bishop on f6 with the queen because the g-pawn is pinned. So after white captures the queen, black can't even recapture. So despite the position looking completely out of control, black still has to be accurate. And then comes the move that made me rewind the entire game. Queen takes b3. A full queen sacrifice for a knight. Objectively, black isn't sacrificing the queen for material at all. They're sacrificing it for geography. The only thing that matters is dragging white's king onto b3. Once the king lands there, every black piece suddenly springs to life. And honestly, just look at that poor king. Even without calculating anything, you can probably almost feel it in your bone marrow that a king standing on b3, surrounded by enemy pieces like this, cannot possibly survive. After king takes b3, black continues with rook to b8 check. Now, interestingly, black already misses the fastest mate here. Bishop to c4 check would have forced the king to a4, followed immediately by rook to a8 checkmate. Beautiful finish. Instead, the game continues with king to a4, rook to c4 check, and once again, black should be mating very soon. Although it's worth mentioning that after king to a4, black had yet another mate too. Knight to c5 check, king to a5, rook to b5 checkmate, another lovely mating pattern. But as you can see, black misses that as well. And after white's move, king to a5, this was the starting position of the daily puzzle. When I first saw this position, I thought, that seems quite refreshing. It's not another back rank mate or some loose piece hanging. There's actually a genuinely attractive mating idea hidden here. The correct move is rook to a4 check. Yes, we're sacrificing the rook. White has no choice but to take it, after which knight to c5 check forces the king back to a5, and only then comes rook to b5 checkmate. What's particularly satisfying is that black didn't actually need to sacrifice the rook. The exact same mating construction already existed one move earlier while the rook was still on c1, but sacrificing it just makes the whole thing even prettier. Unfortunately, that's not what happened in the game. I think black must have felt nervous. Maybe they just assumed that once the king had been dragged this far into enemy territory, any check would eventually lead to mate. After all, there are so many checks available. But chess is cruel like that. One inaccurate check is all it takes. Instead of rook to a4, black played rook to b5 check, which simply hangs the bishop on a6. White calmly captures it, and suddenly the evaluation swings completely. Black goes from having multiple forced mates to now being down a queen and completely lost. It's actually quite tragic. Black found the hardest move in the entire combination, the spectacular queen sacrifice that drags the king into the open, but then, once everything should have been easy, managed to throw the win away. White eventually won the game on time, but that's honestly probably beside the point. What I really liked about this puzzle is that it wasn't some composed study where every piece was carefully arranged to create a nice finish. This came from an actual 5-minute blitz game between two 1,600 rated players. One player found a gorgeous queen sacrifice and then screwed it all up. Honestly, that's about as blitz as things get.